Everybody Hates Rand is a Wheel of Time podcast that will contain spoilers for all 14 books. So if you're anti-spoiler, stop this, read all 14 books, and come back. We'll be here, waiting.
Our title is a joke and is meant to be taken as such. Everybody in this context refers to us and our cats. You are free to feel however you want about Rand. He's a fictional character. Please don't DM us.
The world is a mess, Dark One stretching out his hand. The dragon's reborn, the fire's been fanned, but everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand. Everybody hates Rand.
I'd like to begin by apologizing for any upsetting mouth noises that I might make during this podcast. I'm recovering from an illness.
I was sicky this week.
But before we get too far into that, this is Everybody Hates Rand, a friendly neighborhood Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Emily Jushaw.
And I am Sally Goodger.
We read 3 chapters this week because we hate ourselves. So, we pick up with Matt, who has got it into his little head that he needs to check up on his money, because, I don't know, he's just a little guy who loves money. Anyway, so Matt goes to the Wandering Woman, and Satalanon is not there at the moment, so after some brief, senseless interactions with her daughter, who is in charge of the inn while she's gone, and, the maid, Kara, who, Matt was flirting with quite a bit and maybe having sex with back in Crown of Swords, but when, Nynaeve and Elaine came to see Matt, she assumed he was seeing other women, so she's been cold-shouldering him since then. Which brings up probably the main point of these 3 chapters, is that you would have no recollection of Kara, probably, if you had read Path of Daggers, the one between these? Mm-hmm. If you'd read Path of Daggers, then that's quite a chunk of time to forget about that very minute subplot between Matt and Kara. Mm-hmm. Or Kyra, however you say her name. And that's what's going on with a lot of these 3 chapters. We're picking up plots that were not abandoned, that were left behind in book 4.
Yeah.
In the worst instances, or book 7, which is still quite a while ago, in which, since Sally and I didn't read Path of Daggers, is a little fresher in the brain for us, but, that's still a solid 1,000 pages ago.
Yeah, and in several instances, they're not, main plots. We pick up with Aegianan, who meets Bethaman. I always want to call her Bethany.
Her name should be Bethany.
And, their interaction in Tanchico, I guess, would be considered not exactly a minute plot. But, we still don't get a ton of... it's big in Aegianan's plot to be oh my god, they can channel.
Yeah, but we only get, 2 points of view from Aegianan and Tanchico, and it's not like she tells anyone else about it.
Yeah, so it's just, we're expected to remember these small details, or medium-sized details, I guess, if you have a better memory. To me, they're all small details, because I have no mind for plot.
Yeah, it feels ridiculous to say that Aegianan, having kept a woman locked in her basement, is a minute detail, but in the scheme of things, in book 4, it really was.
You're so right, Bessie, you're so right. It is not medium-sized detail, it is small, especially because it was 3,000 pages ago.
So long.
So it's the worst part of these doorstop fantasy books that sprawl even 4, 5, 6, 7 books, much less 14 books plus a prequel, are just how am I supposed to remember these characters? How am I supposed to remember these plots? I barely remember what our main cast of characters is doing, because they're all doing such different things at different points. So these couple chapters felt particularly frustrating, because it's I don't even remember who Teslin and Jolene are most of the time, and they're significant drivers of the plot in Nebudar at this point.
Yeah, they're I think it's definitely a hallmark of the doorstop fantasy novels. I think it's also a detriment of this narration style, and I don't generally have any problem with third person point of view narrators. I think that's fine. I'm not trying to equivocate on that. It's just that when you are going through third person point of view narrators, and you're really committing to just using their point of view, then it seems ridiculous to be, like, in their head, like, oh, and this brings to mind what happened for, 6 months ago, and just to, like, refresh the reader's memory. Whereas when you have more of an omniscient narrator, which I more typically see in, like, children's fantasy, where you get this kind of, like, overarching person who can just sort of chime in every once in a while and be like, this is because da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, if you are less familiar with narration styles, when you have third-person points of view, so typically narrated he or she, you can have third-person you can have omniscient narrators in lots of different ways, but you can have third-person omniscient, which means it would be like Matt was doing da-da-da-da, and then it will, like Emily said, kind of flow away and give you, like, a much bigger picture, calling to mind the past or what somebody else is doing, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's like a series of unfortunate events.
Yes.
Matt was doing this. What he didn't know was that the Golan was actually just, da-da-da-da.
Exactly. Or you can have third-person close points of view. I think that's the correct term.
Closer limited, I think.
Yeah, I think limited is actually what I'm sort of looking for, but close or limited. Emily is probably correct. Which stays very closely to the point of view character. It's like having a first-person narrator because you're not slipping out of their point of view, but you are maintaining the third-person pronouns. So
yeah, so, like, the way Robert Jordan tries to maintain any sense of omniscience. Hi, Ed. Robert Jordan tries to have an omniscient narrator beyond his whole little wind things at the beginning, by having so many points of view that it seems difficult that we would miss anything. But we're still seeing the drawbacks of that here when, like, there's been no reason for Aegianan to be in the plot for the last 5 books, so she hasn't been, of course. But now when we're just picking up right where we left off with her 5 books later, of course we have forgotten literally everything about her.
Yeah, I think, not to fall into my bad habit of correcting Wheel of Time, but I actually think having more of an omniscient third point of view would have been more productive for this series than having so many points of view.
And it's it's thematic. Robert Jordan is trying to have, like, each individual person represent, like, a thread, and all those threads are coming together, being woven into a tapestry, like unto all the weaving and patterns and nonsense that's going on in Wheel of Time. But that's just, there's pros and cons to that. The pros, I guess you get some neat symbolism. The cons is, I'm confused. I'm confused.
I've been conned by Robert Jordan.
Yeah,
no, I think the symbolism, the thematic nature of having many different points of view and many things happening is really interesting. I think it could have been accomplished with fewer points of view than we were given. I think the same thing could have been accomplished if you kept to mainly our main cast of characters with enough sort of, like, different emphasis on things, but the con, mainly for me, an idiot, is that I have no idea what's going on half or more of the time, so.
I don't think you're an idiot, I just don't know how anyone can be expected to remember who the fuck Bethaman is.
Yeah.
So, Matt even is like, why is Kara so mad at me? And it's Robert Jordan is like, it's because men don't understand women. And it's like, no, legitimately, Robert Jordan, why is she mad at Matt?
Yeah, no, it's even if other women came to visit him. What?
No, whatever. It's not like they had a conversation where they were like, we're exclusively dating. Whatever. So Matt's at this inn, and he's like, it's fine, I'll just wait for Satal and On. And the daughter, Satal's daughter, is, like, sufficiently distracted to sort of let that slide. We get a name drop here to Air Captain Yulon, which I only mention because I feel like he's one of the, half a dozen or so Shanshan who we frequently get points of view with whenever we're dealing with the Shanshan. Yulon, like Kareed, other people like that.
Kareed.
Yeah, Furyk. Kareed.
Imagine being named Furyk.
I don't want to. I have the last name Dushan. That's been
be Furyk
a burden
Dushan.
enough. Yeah, woof.
Yes, Matt slips into the kitchens, basically.
To wait for Satalanan, he banters a little bit with Enid, who is the cook at the Wandering Woman. He's like, yeah, the food at the palace doesn't match up to yours. And she's like, oh, how sweet. And immediately gives him some food. And he's like, Macathon, charming women everywhere I go.
No, your mom, wherever you are, know that your mom would love Matt Cathon if
Yeah.
you brought this man home as a friend or a lover.
He's just such a good little scamp.
I know, everyone would be like, that Matt Cathon.
That Macathon. He's such a little mischief maker, but so polite.
But so
sometimes.
polite, and he's just such a nice guy.
He's a nice guy. A really nice guy. What is that from?
I don't know.
It's gonna bother me. Whatever. Matt's finishing up his fish or whatever when Satalanan comes in through the back door, followed by a woman in a hood. And Satalanan tells Enid to, like, leave the kitchen and make sure no one else comes in. The woman in the hood takes her hood off and reveals herself to be Jolene, who Matt recognizes as one of the two White Tower Aes Sedai who was in the palace when the Shanshin attacked, and he, I think, along with everyone, had just assumed she'd escaped somehow.
Jolene.
I don't like this Jolene.
I don't like this Jolene either.
Yeah. Where are the good Jolines? Where are all the good Jolines? And
Where are all the gods? Where's the streetwise Hercules to fight the rising odds?
Jolene starts saying something to Matt. She's being pretty incautious. When suddenly there are voices outside the kitchen, Shanshin accented voices, and everyone is like, oh my god, Enid can't stop them. So Matt does the only thing he can think of, which is I think he mentions that Shanshin are really weird about PDA. So he grabs Jolene and pretends to kiss her. Does not actually kiss her, notably. So that her face, is turned right toward his, and her back is to the room. Because she has the Aes Sedai face, which of course has been sort of like the main thing about the Aes Sedai getting caught by the Shanshin. So anyway, the Shanshin who do enter are Edgianan, Edgianan and Bael Doman, who has shaved his head and his beard in the Shanshin style, so like he has his beard, but it ends in the middle of his ears, I think, so.
Yeah.
Or something. I can't remember. I don't like to picture the Shanshin haircuts. They upset me too much. And they're just like, Edgianan's like, yeah, I just need a room. I have a commission. I'm high up in the Shanshin or whatever. And we're all, if you remember, which most people don't, but if you do remember, you'd be like, Edgianan was kind of on the outs with the Shanshin at the end of book 4, and she had... Sorry, Till just yawned so loudly.
He also paused in the middle of a yawn, which I've never seen a cat do.
He just, thought about it for a minute.
Tibble, you're funny.
You little dummy.
Look how many whiskers he has.
Just gotta use those to sense the world. It's a big world out there.
A big world in this
Just
town.
a little cat.
You're just a little baby.
Yeah, the last time we saw Edgianan, she was, agreeing to take the male Adam, the bracelet and necklace thing that could be used on men who can channel. She was just gonna go with Bael Doman and dump that in the middle of the ocean, which is decidedly an unshanshin thing to do. Mm-hmm. And, she knew that. She knew the big secret that also Dom can channel, and just, she was really losing the faith coming out of her sort of empire brainwashing.
Yeah, deprogrammed TM.
Yeah, deprogrammed TM. But here she's back, and she appears to have been promoted, and Bael Doman is acting as, a servant. So we, the readers, might be a little bit confused by that, or we, the readers, might be confused because Edgianan, surely I know that name? Is she a character? Oh, Bael Doman. I don't think Bael Doman is referenced by name. We just get the big guy with an Illianer accent, and Matt is like, that guy looks familiar.
Where have I seen that guy before?
Yeah, poor little Matt with the holes in his memories.
Don't worry, though. Bael Doman.
Bael Doman clocked Matt, though.
He was like, I know that man.
I know that little weirdo.
I know him.
Anyway, Satalanan is like, yeah, you can have a room in the inn, but I have tons of Shanshin staying in the inn, so you're not the highest ranked among them, so deal with it. And Edgianan's like, fine. and leaves. Jolene is in hysterics when they leave because Stalanon puts it that her nerve has been broken, and it's just like she's very traumatized from having to be in hiding from the Shanchin who would enslave her. And it seems like there have been several near misses. This isn't the only one. Of course, Robert Jordan is saying then that there have been near misses, and yet Jolene is still uncautious. Therefore, Jolene is an idiot.
Yeah.
Because all women are idiots.
Didn't you know?
Don't you know? Matt has to carry Jolene down into the cellar where she is presumably going to be hiding for the next little while. Stalanon gives Enid instructions that no one is allowed to go into the cellar except herself, Satal, and Enid. And Enid just like thumbs up. So what we're seeing here is Stalanon with assistance from Enid and perhaps others who we aren't seeing, operating a sort of underground railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And or I don't believe that there is an official name for this, but the system of civilians hiding Jews and other people who were at risk under Nazi occupation or in Germany during World War II.
Yeah, there's also, I mean, what we're seeing with this is, it very much calls to mind the Anne Frank sort of story of being hidden from the Nazis by, yes, a civilian who is also not Jewish.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, typically they would not be Jewish if they were hiding Jewish people. What am I saying? So we are seeing the Anne Frank type story of someone being hidden from the Nazis by a civilian, someone who is not Jewish. And so that's very much what is being called to mind, because that is, I think, the most famous and well-known example of this, but this is something, like Emily referenced, that you see very frequently in genocides, basically, I think, or other sort of large systems of persecution against one particular group. Emily referenced the Underground Railroad. There was also examples of this happening during the Rwandan genocide. I read a book where a woman and, like, 12 other people were hidden in the second bathroom of someone's home for, like, months on end. So it's something that you see in stories like this. So Robert Jordan is hitting on kind of a hallmark of persecution, I guess. I think this, I don't know exactly, I want to say genocide, but I don't know if that's quite like sort of a, on the quote unquote menu of genocide, hallmarks is the only word I can think of. And I find it really interesting because I don't entirely see the purpose of doing this, other than the fact that it is kind of expected in situations like this. Yeah, I don't know. I just find it a really interesting plot. To me, it feels like it happens simply because it is expected that something like this would happen. I don't know if it teaches us anything about Shanchin that we don't already know, or teaches us anything about our main cast of characters that we don't already know. Anyway.
Yeah, it's difficult because, as you alluded to, as long as there has been genocide and groups of people targeting other groups of people for murder or enslavement, there have been third parties who have been trying to help the oppressed and persecuted, which is sort of a nice thing to think about. I think generally a sort of spark of hope that in resistance and just the idea of humanity helping each other. And it's a little tough because I think if the Wheel of Time was committed to the project of portraying the Shanchin as the bad guys, then this would make a lot more sense. There would be a lot more to say about like resistance and hope in the face of oppression.
Yeah.
And the idea that people even in these occupied territories are still helping each other. So, maybe there's something to be done in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens in the Wheel of Time is just that these Shanchin occupied territories are left to the Shanchin, more or less.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, I agree. I don't really know what the point Robert Jordan is trying to make here. No,
that is such a good point, because argument I made in my thesis, and an argument I will continue to make, is that very often in literature, at least Western literature, and I also kind of think this is the case in fantasy in particular, we'll sort of fall back on these, well, not necessarily fall back on, we'll rely on the kind of vocabulary of the Holocaust in particular in order to equate to an insurmountable evil, or like the worst literal hell on earth. We'll call back to things like concentration camps, hiding people in basements, attics, second rooms.
Yeah, it's shorthand for the unspeakable.
Yeah, look at you.
I read your thesis.
Oh, hey, thanks, man. And so it's become this, like, really, and I don't say easy in a bad way, like a really easy vocabulary for people to try and convey these types of things. Easy maybe in a bad way, in that it's called on perhaps a little bit too frequently without intent, of just sort of being like, well, if I do this, then they'll know just how bad it is, without really investigating what any of that means.
Especially in, like, political rhetoric.
Yes, exactly. This is he's just like Hitler. This is just like the Holocaust, blah, 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 blah. Like, it also is frustrating because, like, the Holocaust is not the only genocide that has ever happened, and so this side, like, hyper-focus on it is a detriment, I think. But
yeah, and the idea is that with hyper-focus, you eventually render things meaningless.
yeah.
Which I think we see especially in political rhetoric.
Yes.
In literature, I think, to your point that you made in your thesis, there is still some power to be had in making comparisons.
Yeah, there is, because you are participating in sort of a larger conversation around it. And so I'm struggling to make my point, much like I did in my thesis, but I think there is power in it, because, like, let's jump to one of our favorite books, Finnegan of the Rock. Finnegan of the Rock relies very heavily on images of genocide and the Holocaust in particular. You are set up to think this way by the foreword, which is from Theodore Adorno, who is a survivor of the Holocaust, who wrote very extensively about it. So you're sort of put in this framework, and using this framework, you get a lot of meaning and value out of that book regarding persecution. In Wheel of Time, you are playing with the same vocabulary, but the meaning hits very badly because it's not very obvious that the Shanshan are the bad guys. Mm-hmm. So that was a very long-winded way to say that you are smart.
No, you're smart. You wrote the thesis. Yeah, I like this little subplot of Matt's, where he is sort of getting a bunch of people together to get people out of Abu Dar, including himself. He is, I mean, we can't play victim Olympics here, but Matt is equally someone who is being victimized here in Abu Dar, even if it's not by the Shanshan specifically.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, I like that subplot. But it's hard, because then I start wondering, like, do I like it because it's just, like, sort of fun, you know, to watch Matt do his thing? Or do I like it because I'm a sucker and I'm falling for the whole hope in the face of oppression stuff that Robert Jordan is clearly relying on a lot here for pathos?
Yeah, no, it's hard because, of course, it hits very deeply. And you look at it and you think, well, if this ever happened in real life, I would definitely be Satalanon, and I would help hide someone, you know? And I think it's very hard not to respond to that call to pathos, because you want to see the best in the characters that you're reading about, and it also helps you imagine, at the very least, that you could be the best in that situation, too. So I agree, I really like it. And it also is, to Robert Jordan's credit, I think, one of the more interesting groups of people, this group of very victimized people in very different ways, who are subject to a lot of powers at B that are causing various traumas and problems in their life, sort of coming together and getting out. Like, there's something really powerful about that, even if I know a trick is being played on me a little bit.
Yeah. So Satalanon is like, here's Jolene. She's in a lot of trouble. I was hoping that you would help her get out of the city since you are planning to leave. And Matt has already referenced that he believes he owes Jolene a debt, but here he, tests her a little bit by referencing the note that was left in his pocket in Crown of Swords, which, again, if you have not read Crown of Swords recently, you probably would have totally forgotten, because it was such a one-off. But he's like, oh yeah, you left it on my pillow, knowing that it was left in his pocket. And Jolene is just like, oh yeah, that note. So, clearly lying. And Matt is kind of like, ugh, well, that means that Teslin was the one who left the note. Process of elimination. He's not just going to leave Jolene because she failed the test. He is already committed to helping her. Because Matt, at his heart, wants to help people.
Yeah.
But then he's like, that leads to the much more complicated situation of getting Teslin out of Shanshan, and she's a demon, so she's much more closely, it's going to be much more complicated.
Yeah.
So he leaves the inn and goes to the demon kennels, which is such a horrific...
Makes me want to vomit every time.
Yeah, way to refer to them. This is like the Terrace and Palace's attic has been repurposed to make these little dorm-style rooms for all of the demon. And he knows that random people aren't allowed up in there, but he's just like kind of going through, poking his head in at doors. He's seeing a lot of Seafolk Windfinders. And this is, again, another very, like, pathos-evoking scene, because, of course, we're seeing it through Matt's point of view, but it's also, like, they're called the kennels. There's a woman just sobbing in the background the entire time. It's very disturbing. Mm-hmm. And Matt, the whole time, is just like, oh my god, I want to help everyone here, but I simply cannot.
Yeah.
But eventually he finds Teslin, and I enjoy Matt and Teslin's relationship. I think they have one of the more interesting relationships between Matt and any of the Aes Sedai.
I agree.
But he's just like, you left me a note, why? And she's like, I basically just wanted to piss Aleda off. I wanted to piss Aleda off so badly that I drugged Jolene on the day of the Shanshan invasion with Forkroot so that she couldn't, like, stop Elaine and Nynaeve from leaving. Which explains why Jolene was drugged and why the Shanshan then didn't find her immediately. Blah, blah, blah. So Teslin is like, there's some irony there in that, Jolene then got out and I didn't. And Matt doesn't correct her by saying, oh, Jolene's still stuck in the city, but he's just like, okay, well, I'm going to try and get you out. And Teslin's like, I'll do you one better. You're going to get me out and you're going to get out another Aes Sedai who's still in here, Edicina. And Matt's like, oh.
It's like, the list is already like
I know,
19
Matt's like,
people.
oh my god, I've got so many.
He's got a sticky note and there's like 80 names on it.
And he's just like, oh, okay, God, well, all right. And she's just like, I mean, I don't know. That's basically the extent of their conversation.
Yeah.
Matt leaves, very caught up in his thoughts about this, and kind of thinking, okay, I've really got to get Tom and Julin on board, and we've really got to start planning. And he runs into Tuon on his way out, and she's like, what are you doing, you pervert? Why are you up in the demon kennels? Because, yeah, some men are creeps and would like to sexually assault the demon. And I'm like, girl, you do not have the moral high ground here.
Yeah, it's also like, what a intuitive leap to, I don't know, it just feels, for her to just like, start slinging accusations, I'm like, you are keeping them in prison, so in what way are you enabling the men who sexually assault the demon by making these women unable to move freely? I don't know, maybe think about how complicit you are in the crimes against humanity happening all around you.
Anyway, Matt immediately comes up with a decent lie that gets him out of the situation.
Classic.
I know, he's so quick on his little feet. And Tuon's like, oh my god, that's so sweet that you're nice to Damon. And he's like, okay, you creep. Get lost.
Yeah, one quick thought I had while reading, sorry, that I want to note before we jump over to Edgionan's points of view. I've been flapping my mouth quite a bit this podcast. Matt's sort of like, as he's going to like places and starts collecting this task, which leads to this task, which leads to this task, also feels very mythological and trickstery. Like when you go through sort of like the fairy tale vibe of being like, we'll go see this person and they'll give you something, and then you get it, but it's like, oh, you also have to do this in order to achieve it. So it's kind of getting, the whole Ebudar escape starts to feel more and more trickstery and more mythological, almost as we sort of attach people to Matt.
Yeah, I'm
That's
really
my
into
thought.
it. I think
Yeah.
that's another good reason to really be into it.
Yeah, no, it's fun. And it does have its little comedic value of Matt seriously having like 25 people that leave Ebudar with him.
Yeah, in a circus.
Yeah.
It cannot be overstated that his escape plan is a literal circus.
Run away and join the circus.
You know, but pretty good.
Yeah.
We then swap over to Bethamin's point of view, pretty close, pretty soon, we imagine, after or before Matt himself has been up in the attics. She and another Soldam are inspecting the kennels, and there is just as much disgusting rhetoric as you would imagine there to be in this, so we'll just kind of
skip
over that. The main points to hit are that Bethamin is... Okay, so let's rewind way back to book 2. Bethamin...
Jesus Christ.
What?
Book 2?
I know, book 2!
2!
In book 2, when Elaine, Nynaeve, and Min got Egg out of Falme, where Egg was collared by the Shanshin, they did this by leaving 2 Soldam collared in her place.
Right.
This is Sita and Rena. I might be mixing those up. It might be Rita and I don't know.
Some ladies.
2 gals. Bethamin came upon them and therefore found out the big secret. Those 2 don't know that Bethamin saw them, but Bethamin is aware. Bethamin then somehow got caught by Egeonin and revealed the big secret. So we have 3 Soldam who are aware of the big secret. 2 of them, those 2, Sita and Rena, only got out of it because apparently Suroth was the one who, like, I don't know, she didn't literally find them, we can imagine, but Suroth is in on it, and Suroth is suppressing that secret by just, like, not changing anything with them. She's just like, you'll continue being Soldam. Bethamin's like, she could have them killed, but it's kind of a big deal when Soldam get murdered. Obviously.
Jeez.
So then Bethamin is sort of this, like, carrier of this secret and the only one without, and somehow the only person who knows this secret without anyone else knowing she knows the secret. Except Egeonin.
Mm-hmm.
But she hasn't really considered Egeonin to be a big problem. So, like, these 2 other Soldam are kind of, like, not given any responsibility. They have kind of been, like, demoted. Mm-hmm. Whereas Bethamin is just sort of skating by. Bethamin, leaves because it's basically her day off.
Yeah.
And her plan is to go shopping, but when she gets back to, like, the inn that she's staying at, the innkeeper is like, oh, there's a guy here to see you. And Bethamin's like, oh, that's weird. Goes upstairs, and it is, they're called Seekers. And again, this guy hasn't been around since book 4, when he interrogated Egeonin very briefly in, like, her kitchen. He never knew that Bethamin was locked in the basement, I believe. He just associates Bethamin with Egeonin because, like, I don't know, they have some sort of association.
Yeah.
This guy's basically a PI who answers to the government, and boy has he come up with the wackest conspiracy theory of all time.
Yeah.
Bethamin walks in and he's basically got his, like, Pepe Sylvia board all laid out, and he's like, you're connected to Egeonin, Egeon is connected to Bael'Damon. Bael'Damon's connected to Turok. Turok died under mysterious circumstances. I think Suroth had something to do with it. And it's all just, like, a guy... It's pretty comedic, actually, when you think of it as, like, a guy who is so far outside of the main plot.
Yeah.
You know? Just trying wildly to piece it together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course he doesn't know that Turok died because the Dragon Reborn and his group of misfits broke into this house looking for the Horn of Valir and dueled Turok to the death.
Yeah.
How could he possibly know that? He's just like, yeah, so probably Suroth did it, because now she's in charge. She's clearly the only one who gained.
Yeah.
And so therefore he's sort of stumbling into a sort of greater truth, which is that Suroth is evil.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you know, it's insane.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It feels like me trying to watch a crime procedural, being like, I know what's happening.
I know what's I put the pieces together.
You haven't put anything.
You haven't put shit together. I put the pieces together.
It's very much what it feels like, of being like, I know who did it. I'm making my guess.
Yeah, he is just, like, sliding he's, like, putting in his guess in a game of Clue. Yeah. And everyone's like, you're
what
so
are you
wrong,
saying?
bestie.
Yeah, he's like,
but good
Suroth
effort.
at Falme with the candlestick.
And everyone's like, no. It was the Dragon Reborn at Falme with a sword.
With a sword. And he's like, that's impossible.
Why would the Dragon Reborn be there? And you're like, your guess is as good as mine,
Aren't
bud.
you a PI? You're not
He was
very good
chasing
at
the
it.
Horn of Valir.
Yeah.
What? Anyway.
Yeah, so he's missing some vital pieces of information.
But, and you know, if you can't, like, piece that together because his explanation is so long-winded and weird.
Yeah.
That you're like, wait, is this what happened? Or at least I am, because, like, book 2 was so long ago, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, did Suroth have something to do with it? You know?
I'm like, I don't fucking remember. I didn't even remember that guy's name.
Yeah. I don't think he has a name yet.
No, Turok.
Oh, Turok,
I was like, I don't know who that is.
That weirdo who was only there for, like, 2 pages? Yeah, it's very confusing. So, and because we're not in an omniscient, narration, we don't, you know, there's no one saying, like, okay, well, this was what actually happened.
Yeah, no one's like, and he was wrong.
And he was super duper wrong.
Let me tell you what actually happened.
Yeah, you just sort of have to get there on your own. But he tells Bethamin that he wants her to, rekindle her friendship with Aegyanin and then report back to him because he thinks Aegyanin will somehow lead back into this conspiracy theory. And she's like, okay. Obviously, like, Aegyanin's the woman who checked me in a basement.
Yeah,
I am not friends with her, but...
Rekindle anything there.
You know, I can't really tell this guy that, because if he knew the actual truth, then that would be bad too. A smash cut to Aegyanin and Bael Domon, who are like, woe is us, this situation is so bad. Apparently what happened, and we really have to piece this together from Aegyanin's perspective, is that they were fully planning on dropping the male Adam into the ocean, when, wouldn't you know it, they got stopped by a Shanshin ship, who, the only way they could get out of it that Aegyanin could find was to present the Adam to them. You know, they couldn't just, like, lie their way out. Aegyanin had to be like, oh, here's this special gift.
I know, I do not understand
for the
how
Empress.
this went down.
Yeah, Aegyanin did a big bad here. Just a big stupid fuck up here.
Just been like, I'm sailing to look for backup. Like, literally any solution could have been better than giving the worst possible tool to the worst possible person.
Yeah, and this is all, like, setting up further how the male Adam is now in Suroth's hands, which is how it will end up in Semiraj's hands, which is how da-da-da-da-da, you know? Sort of, you have to follow it like a red string across the puzzle board. Aegyanin and Domon seem to be lovers, and Aegyanin is, like, also to save Domon's life, like, basically put him up for sale and then bought him. So he's now her servant, I guess. But anyway, she got a big promotion from giving the male Adam, and now she has Domon, and now they're just, like, both right back into the Shanshin system, and they're both like, oh, we want to get out of this city. Because Aegyanin's like, I don't really believe in any of this shit anymore. She's not very concerned about the male Adam, though, which is troubling. I feel like no one impressed upon her enough how bad that could be.
Yeah.
But she's like, how could I get back to the Dragon Reborn? And I'm like, girl, teleporting is a thing now.
Teleporting is a thing. Shanshin has already conquered, like, half the continent or whatever at this point.
Yeah, and also, he's, like, the main homie who can channel the male half of the power, so, like, don't you think it would come up?
Yeah, don't you think they'd be like, you know who we could use? It wouldn't be like, you know who could use Sun? Narishma.
Oh, that guy, that random guy over there. No, they're gonna be like, the Dragon Reborn, let's get him.
Yeah.
Stupid. Anyway, so they're all sort of, like, bemoaning their fate when Bethamin comes in and is like, you'll never believe this. And Aegyanin's like, oh, you're right, I would never have believed that. But she's like, okay, what the fuck ever, yeah, just do what he says and I'll take care of it. And Bael Domon's like, should we kill him? And she's like, no.
It's bad to kill the seekers.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't find him, first of all. Yeah. Bael Domon's like, dang it.
Like, you don't know what I'm capable of.
He's like, well, luckily I have a backup plan, which is that we rely on the world's best escape artist, Matt Cathon.
Yeah.
And she's like, who the fuck is Matt Cathon? And then, you know, smash cut to Matt Cathon doing something ridiculous. No, Bael Domon's like, yeah, that weird guy in the kitchens, I recognized him. I picked him up. His whole history with Matt.
And Tom.
Yeah, he's like, and he hangs out with Tom.
Killed 2 Kings, Marilyn.
killed two kings, Marilyn, who we definitely know is good in a fight. And it's like, I think arguably Matt is a better escape artist than Tom at this point, but they are of the same mold.
Yeah, no, I agree. Bail Damon is definitely like, no, Matt is who we need. Tom is just a welcome addition to the crew.
Bail Damon's like, when I first met Matt, he had just escaped Shadar Lagoth, the worst place in the world. And then I thought he died in Whitebridge, where there was basically a bomb went off, but he's here, so clearly he escaped that. So let's go for round 3, baby. What else can he escape?
Doesn't even know about all the escapes in between.
I know, God.
The Tarvalon escape.
And the breaking into things.
Yeah.
Stone of Tiamat's a real cat burglar.
Matt can get in and out of anywhere, and he will.
So that sort of, like, brings our little, you know, these are two people who Matt isn't collecting. They're collecting Matt, which is an interesting...
Yeah.
But it's also very, like, mythological as we're having these people all sort of start to intertwine together. Because Domon and Egianen will bring this sort of, like, Shanshan legitimacy to the table. Like, Egianen can get the papers they need, da-da-da-da-da. And they'll bring with them the Soldam, who need to escape as well. So that's how we can get the Aes Sedai out, disguised as Domon, you know.
Yep, the plan's coming together.
It's all coming together. It hasn't yet, but it is starting to, which is where we leave.
Sorry if you can hear Ed purring into the microphone.
He's a loud little guy. So that's those chapters.
That's those chapters.
I almost just said any questions. Like,
Any questions?
any questions?
I mean, you can tweet us questions, I guess. No guarantee it'll be a good answer.
You know, I'll just be like, I don't know, bestie. I'm sick.
I'm sick.
Boo.
Why
You
are you
whore.
so loud?
Oh, Ed. Do you have anything to add?
No. Once again, I truly believe I have said more than enough.
Said so many nice things. Oh, wait. Rapid fire round.
Oh.
Favorite character, least favorite character.
My favorite character is Enid the cook.
Oh, she's good. She was gonna be mine.
Oh, sorry.
I'll say Teslin, though, because Teslin's also very cool, I think.
Yeah,
I really admired that her whole,
yes.
motivation to pass Matt a secret, mysterious note was to piss off Eleda. I think that's very powerful
It's
of
very
her.
admirable of her.
Least favorite character, there are so many to choose from, but I truly did not enjoy being in Bethamin's head. She is really rancid, and I just hated it all.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Tuon.
Yeah, I mean, she was
Our
there.
brief interaction with her is very rancid.
pretty bad, yeah.
So, I mean, there's just, like, you can really just line up any of the Shanshan. Like, even Egion, and I'm like...
Girl, you're on thin ice.
You're on thin ice. Like, you are really, as much as you claim to be like, oh, I hate this show, like, you are really using that privilege to get rooms at inns and buy your boyfriend and give up weapons of mass destruction, basically.
Yeah, that was a big bad Aegianen.
Actually, I'm going to change... I mean, Tuon is bad, but I'm going to change to Aegianen officially for giving the Soldam, the Adam to Suroth. That was...
So stupid.
Seems very avoidable.
The world's biggest fuck up.
Yeah, like, you could have just dropped it into the ocean anyway.
Yeah.
Been like, oh, but...
Oh, oops, what was that?
Yeah, real Jack Sparrow moment.
Yeah, dang it. Okay. Well, everyone, thanks. Thanks to Glenna Mackenzie for our theme song, and to our patrons on Patreon, and our followers on social media.
We love you.
I like you. I don't know, love is a pretty strong word.
We like you, and I love you. And Ed loves you.
Ed does love you. He has lots of love in his heart.
Look at him. He's just I was gonna say little guy, but he's
He's got the shape of a bowling ball.
he's quite a big guy.
The heft of one.
You a big man.
Do you have a sign off?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I should. Oh, this is pretty random, but yesterday I had to get a HIDA scan, which is a scan of your gallbladder. So I was in a weird little tube, and they had a TV above me. So I was like in the tube looking at this TV.
Like at the dentist's office.
Exactly like at the dentist office. And they gave me the remote, which I could barely push because I had an IV in my right arm. So I could only really flip between HGTV and the Cooking Network.
Ugh.
And HGTV worked for most of the time, so it was really nice. But then it cut off, so I had to watch the Cooking Network. And I spent like 30 minutes watching the Pioneer Woman make the most atrocious looking pasta salad.
I didn't know the Pioneer Woman was real.
I was was like, what is this show? And it was called The Pioneer Woman. I don't know what her actual name is, but she was making food for a ranch cookout.
Ew.
And, like, I have nothing, like, necessarily against pasta salad, but the, like, dressing for this starts with, like, 1 cup of mayonnaise and, like, 1 cup of sour cream or something, and I was like, what is this?
If she's the Pioneer Woman, she's probably Mormon, and that sounds like most Mormon cuisine that I've experienced. Starts with a lot of mayonnaise and goes there. She's probably holding the Cooking Network hostage. Got a gun to their heads.
And then she put, like, red, orange, and yellow bell peppers, and then banana peppers. And then just put, like, slices of lemon on top. And I was like, Bestie, who's eating this? Anyway, nothing against pasta salad. Nothing necessarily against the Pioneer Woman. But I was like, he kept being like, do you feel sick to your stomach? And I was like,
do I?
Are you seeing this, Justin? Do you feel sick to your stomach?
Did you see how much mayonnaise she put in?
Okay,
goodbye,
anyway,
everyone.
goodbye.